My wife had an accident by the lake and nearly drowned. It was her best friend Vivian who rescued her and took her to the hospital. By the time I arrived at the hospital, the doctor had already said there was nothing they could do to save her. I collapsed onto the ground, feeling completely shattered. When I came to, Vivian told me my wife's body had already been taken to the funeral home. When I returned home, there were strangers gathered at the door, holding various loan agreements. I finally understood that my wife had secretly borrowed several $1 million before her death, and I had become her sole heir. 5 years later, while cleaning at a scenic spot, I suddenly saw my wife, who was supposed to be dead. She was walking arm in arm with a tall man, with a 4 or 5-year-old boy following behind them. She threw me a ticket and smiled, saying, "Take it, look at you. You're as old as my father." I felt a sharp pain in my heart and lost consciousness in the ambulance. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the morning my wife drowned. "Mr. Johnson, please compose yourself." I opened my eyes and saw Vivian standing by my bed with red eyes, holding a document. "We did our best, but Emily was in the water too long and suffered severe oxygen deprivation." Her voice choked as she handed me a glass of water and said, "Drink some water. Don't be too sad." I didn't take it, just staring at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked young. My hair was black, thick, and shiny, and there were no signs of age on my hands. I felt like I had truly come back. In my previous life, I received a call from Vivian saying that Emily had drowned while swimming by the lake. I rushed there immediately, but I couldn't make it in time. When the doctor handed me the death certificate, I collapsed. When I came to my senses, Vivian told me that Emily had already been cremated, leaving only a small urn. I held that urn and couldn't sleep for 3 days. On the 4th day, a group of people came knocking on my door. They were holding various loan contracts, claiming that Emily had accumulated millions of dollars in online loans during her lifetime, and now I had to repay them. After carefully reviewing the documents, I discovered that Emily had transferred all her assets to her mother, leaving me with nothing but a mountain of debt. After the house was auctioned off, I had to move into a basement in a shantytown and work 3 jobs a day to pay off the debt. Day after day, I went from being a respectable company manager to a cleaner at a tourist attraction, unable to even afford medical expenses. Until one day, while sweeping the grounds at Lakeview Scenic Area, I saw Emily, who was supposed to have died 5 years ago. She was walking arm in arm with a tall man, with a 4 or 5-year-old boy by their side. The 3 of them were chatting and laughing, looking very happy. I couldn't believe my eyes and rushed over to ask for an explanation. Emily saw me, paused for a moment, then gave me a disapproving look. "Oh, isn't this my ex-husband? It's been 5 years since we last saw each other. How much you've changed." She pulled out a scenic spot ticket from her bag and threw it at me, saying, "Take it. Look at you. How pitiful." My heart ached sharply, and everything went black before my eyes. I collapsed to the ground. When I woke up, I was back on the day Emily drowned. This time, I won't fall for it again. If you want to pretend to be dead, I'll grant you your wish. Vivian handed me the water cup again, urging me to drink. I reached out to take the cup, but stopped just as I was about to drink. In my previous life, I drank that cup of water and fell unconscious, missing the entire process of Emily being taken away. "I'm not thirsty." I set the cup aside, stood up, and walked toward the hospital bed. Vivian hurriedly stopped me, saying, "Johnson, don't go over there. Emily's condition isn't good right now." I pushed her aside and walked to the bed, lifting the white sheet. Emily lay there, her face rosy, her lips still tinted with color, showing no signs of having drowned. I stared at her for a few seconds, then suddenly reached out and gently pinched her cheek. Emily didn't move, but I could feel her skin was warm and soft. Vivian screamed and ran over. "What are you doing?" I'm saying goodbye to her. My voice was choked with emotion, and tears streamed down my face. Thinking about the past pain, I couldn't help but cry. I cried while clutching her face and arms tightly, as if doing so could vent the anger in my heart. Vivian was frantic, stamping her feet. "Johnson, calm down. Even if it's hard, you can't do this. Will she feel the pain?" I suddenly stopped, turned to Vivian, and asked, "Didn't you say she was already dead? Can the dead still feel pain?" Vivian's face suddenly changed, and she stammered, It was a reflex." I didn't respond to her, took out my phone, dialed a number, and asked, "Hello, is this the funeral home? I want to arrange for cremation as soon as possible today." At that moment, Vivian hurriedly grabbed my arm and asked, "Why the rush? Her family and friends haven't had their final goodbye yet. Emily hated being surrounded by people when she was alive. I respect her choice." I let go of her hand and continued speaking into the phone. "Additionally, I want to donate her organs. What procedures are required?" Vivian's face turned pale as she hurriedly took out her phone to send a message. I sneered inwardly and continued arranging Emily's funeral arrangements. "Since you want to put on a show, I'll play along until the end." Half an hour later, the funeral home staff arrived at the hospital. My wife's greatest wish before she passed away was to help others. With tears in my eyes, I told the staff, "Her passing was so sudden. I hope her life life can continue in another form. The staff handed me a form and said, Mr. Johnson's idea is very good. Which organs do you plan to donate? I thought for a moment, since she drowned, her heart, liver, and kidneys should all be usable, right? If possible, I hope she can become a cadaver teacher to help medical students learn. Vivian suddenly snatched the form. No way. Emily was terrified of this. She told me before she died that she absolutely did not want her organs donated. I looked at her coldly. Vivian, I understand your feelings, but as her husband, this decision is my right. How long have you known each other? 10 years. We've been together since high school. I know her thoughts better. Vivian paced anxiously, saying, You can't do this. At least wait until her mother arrives before making a decision. It turned out she had just sent a message to Emily's mother. The funeral home staff saw us arguing heatedly and came over to mediate, saying, Please don't get so worked up. This is indeed something that requires careful consideration. Why don't we wait until all the family members are here before discussing it together? I nodded, indicating that I understood. All right, let's wait for Emily's mother to arrive. However, to save time, can we go ahead and handle the cremation arrangements first? I've already made the necessary arrangements, and it can be arranged this afternoon. Vivian's face turned pale. Time had passed so quickly. A person who has passed away cannot stay for too long. I sighed. Emily had said before she died that she didn't want too many people to notice when she left, and that it should be as simple as possible. Vivian hurriedly took out her phone and sent a message to Emily's mother, urging her to come quickly. I sneered inwardly, realizing their plan. Emily had faked her drowning death. Vivian had served as a witness to confirm her death, and then while I was asleep, they had secretly taken Emily away, using an empty urn to deceive me. But this time, I wasn't going to let them succeed. I was going to make Emily's fake death real. Less than 20 minutes later, Emily's mother rushed into the ward, with several curlers still in her hair and traces of face mask still on her face. Upon seeing Emily on the hospital bed, she sighed in relief before turning toward me and angrily shouting, How could you do this? My daughter just had an accident, and you're thinking about selling her organs? I didn't react in time and was slapped across the face. Emily's mother pushed aside the funeral home staff and urgently said, Don't come near her. My daughter isn't gone yet. How could you use a knife? The staff looked at each other helplessly and stepped back. Vivian rushed forward to comfort Emily's mother while recovering Emily with the white sheet. As soon as Emily's mother sat down, she pointed at me and said, You're such a bad luck charm. Marrying my daughter was just about spending her money. Now that she's gone, you're thinking about selling her organs. If you want to donate organs, just go die. I covered my face, unable to stop the tears. Mom, I just want Emily's life to continue, to have some meaning. Let me be. Emily's mother was about to hit me again. What right do you have? I'm taking my daughter to be cremated. Don't come near me. I knelt on the ground, silently picked up the cup of water Vivian had given me earlier, and handed it to Emily's mother with both hands, saying, Mom, please don't be angry. Drink some water. Emily's mother had been yelling until she was hoarse. Without thinking, she took the cup and drank it all in one gulp. Vivian was shocked by the scene and hurriedly said, Auntie, don't drink it. But it was already too late. Soon after, Emily's mother collapsed onto the sofa, shaking, and fell into a deep sleep. Vivian was terrified, her face pale, stammering, Johnson, what are you trying to do? I stood up, wiped away my tears, and my expression suddenly became calm. I just wanted things to go according to plan. Vivian took a step back and asked, What plan? Cremation. I smiled. Isn't that what you said yourselves? Emily is already dead. It's time for cremation. Vivian's expression was as if she had seen a ghost. I shrugged. What's wrong? Didn't you say Emily drowned? Aren't drowned people supposed to be cremated? But Vivian stammered, not knowing what to say. I walked over to the sofa and settled Emily's mother. Since Auntie is tired, let's not disturb her rest. Vivian immediately tried to change the subject, saying that Auntie shouldn't be like this. After all, she has high blood pressure and needs to be taken to the emergency room right away. Please take her to the hospital immediately. I'll handle Emily's affairs. That doesn't seem right. I shook my head. You're the head nurse. You know more about medical matters than I do. You should take care of Auntie. I'll handle the cremation arrangements. After saying that, I picked up my phone and dialed the funeral home. Hello, I need to arrange cremation as soon as possible. Yes, it's the person who drowned earlier. Can you handle it this afternoon? At that moment, Vivian hurriedly grabbed my arm and reminded me not to rush. Let's wait until the aunt wakes up. Emily won't run away. I hung up the phone and looked at Vivian. What's wrong with you today? Emily is already gone. You're not sad, so why are you still opposing me arranging her funeral? Vivian's forehead was sweating, and she kept looking at the hospital bed, trying to wake Emily's mother, but Emily's mother was sleeping deeply. The funeral home staff arrived quickly and prepared to transfer Emily's body. Vivian was completely panicked, clutching my hand tightly and shouting, Johnson, I just saw Emily move a little. She might still have a chance. I scoffed and pulled out the death certificate from my pocket. Vivian, You're the head nurse. You should know what this means. If a person declared dead suddenly revives, what kind of medical error would that be? What consequences might you and the hospital face? Vivian turned pale and froze, so I put the death certificate back in my pocket. Are you sure you saw Emily move? Vivian opened her mouth to say something but stopped herself. I followed the funeral home staff out of the ward. Vivian hurriedly pulled out her phone and dialed a number. The funeral home van drove smoothly down the road. I sat in the back seat, my gaze fixed on Emily, unable to suppress a cold smile. In my mind, I recalled the scene from my previous life when I had encountered her at Lakeview Park. That day was sunny and crowded. I was bending down to pick up a drink bottle left behind by a tourist. As I looked up, I saw Emily, who was supposed to have died 5 years ago. She was holding Chris's arm, with a 4 or 5-year-old boy beside them. The three of them were chatting and laughing happily. I stood there frozen, the trash bag in my hand dropping to the ground. Emily saw me, paused for a moment, then squinted her eyes and studied me closely before recognizing me. She said, "Oh, isn't this my ex-husband?" I stammered, You're not supposed to be here." Emily and Chris exchanged glances and burst into laughter, laughing heartily. "Not here. I just wanted to leave you." I took the opportunity to go away. She looked me up and down and said, "How did you get so old in 5 years? Your hair is white, your back is hunched, you look like a 60-year-old man." I couldn't say a word, feeling a pang of pain in my heart. Emily continued teasing me enthusiastically. "Do you know what happened that day at the hospital? You were crying so hard, like a duck being held by the neck, quacking away." She mimicked my crying, exaggerating the sobs, her voice tinged with humor. "Dear, why aren't you by my side anymore? How am I supposed to live now?" Chris joined in. "Don't pay attention to him. Don't let him fool you. This kind of person is the best at playing the victim." Emily pulled out a tourist attraction ticket from her bag, tossed it at me and said, "Take it. Look how pitiful you are." After saying that, she pulled Chris and the child away, leaving me alone in the bustling tourist area, feeling extremely uncomfortable, almost collapsing to the ground. As I was reminiscing about the events, I suddenly heard a faint sound. I looked down and saw Emily's fingers twitch slightly. It seemed the anesthetic was wearing off, and she was about to wake up. "Driver, can you go faster?" I urgently told the driver, worried that my mother-in-law might catch up. She wanted to donate my wife's body to the medical school for dissection, but I only wanted her to leave this world with dignity. The driver nodded and stepped on the gas, and the car accelerated noticeably. I looked at Emily's face and felt a sense of triumph. "This time you won't escape." I leaned closer to Emily and whispered in her ear, "Emily, I know you can hear me. You're not dead. You were just drugged. This was all part of your plan with Chris, wasn't it?" Emily's eyelids twitched slightly but didn't open. "Your plan was really well thought out," I continued, pretending I had drowned, having Vivian testify, and then leaving secretly while I was unconscious, leaving me with a pile of online loans to repay. I saw tears welling up in the corners of her eyes and gently wiped them away. "Don't cry. You've always wanted to live in that lakeside villa, haven't you? I'll take you there now to rest in peace. You might be wondering how I know all this. Actually, you might not believe me, but I've been through something similar before. I was once deceived by you all, left with millions in debt, and ended up homeless on the streets." Emily's fingers began to tremble slightly. The effects of the drug were wearing off. My phone kept vibrating. It was Vivian and Emily's mother calling. I turned off my phone and stuffed it into my pocket. The funeral home's car soon arrived at a secluded pier near Lakeview. I asked the driver, "Can we stop here for a moment? I want my wife to see the lake view she loved most before she passed away." The driver nodded and stopped the car. I pushed Emily's stretcher toward the lake. "Do you know what?" I said to Emily. "When I was cleaning up by this lake before, I saw you, who passed away 5 years ago. You were holding Chris's arm, and you were with your son." Emily's eyes widened, and a look of fear appeared on her face. "Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you." I pushed the stretcher to the edge of the pier. "You loved water, didn't you? Let's go back into the water." Just then, a car suddenly stopped by the shore, and Vivian and Emily's mother rushed out. "Stop!" Emily's mother shouted. "What are you doing?" Vivian hurried over. "Johnson, calm down. Speak properly." I smiled coldly and asked, "What should I say? How could you both deceive me? How could Emily pretend to be drowning in the water?" Emily's mother was already sitting on the ground. How do you know all this?" "Of course I know." I pushed the stretcher forward. Since Emily wanted this, I would let her have her way. Vivian and Emily's mother rushed over to stop me, but they were too anxious and ended up knocking the stretcher over. The stretcher lost its balance and fell into the lake along with Emily. At that moment, Emily was half conscious but unable to move, helplessly watching herself sink to the bottom of the lake. Vivian screamed and tried to jump in to save her, but I quickly pulled her back and said, "Didn't you say she was already gone? Is there no hope of saving her?" Emily's mother knelt on the ground in agony, crying and begging, "Please, save my daughter." I coldly watched the bubbles rising from the lake surface slowly dissipate, thinking to myself, isn't this the outcome you've always wanted? Emily tragically drowned, and the fake situation finally became reality. Bubbles rose from the lake surface, and Vivian and Emily's mother's screams broke the tranquility by the lake. I stood on the shore, fixated on the water's surface. Emily's body had already sunk to the bottom of the lake, but the effects of the drug were beginning to wear off, and she started struggling, flailing her arms in the water, trying to surface. Vivian, in a panic, tried to jump in to save her, but I quickly grabbed her and asked, "What are you doing? To save someone who's already dead? She's still alive." Vivian screamed desperately, "She was just drugged." I feigned surprise. "What? Didn't you say she drowned?" Emily's mother knelt on the ground, crying, "Johnson, please save my daughter. We made a mistake." At that moment, several passing tourists noticed the situation in the lake and began pointing at the water surface and discussing it. "Is there someone in the water? It looks like a girl, and she seems to be in pain." I immediately changed my attitude and acted anxiously. My wife fell into the water," I said, pretending to jump in to save her, but Vivian pulled me back. She was furious, shouting, "Stop pretending. You know she's not dead." The bubbles on the lake's surface gradually diminished, and Emily's struggles grew weaker. Vivian finally broke free from my grip and jumped into the lake. However, her swimming skills were poor, and she could only struggle in the shallow water, unable to reach where Emily had sunk. A few minutes later, the rescue team arrived, but it was too late. When they pulled Emily's body out of the water, she was already gone. "We're so sorry. We did everything we could." The medical staff shook their heads, confirming the time of death. Vivian sat by the lake, soaking wet, her eyes glassy. "Do you know?" She suddenly looked up at me, her voice hoarse, saying, "We called you dozens of times. Why didn't you answer?" I pulled out my phone, pretending to have just noticed it, and said, "Oh, it was turned off. I'm so sorry. I've been too heartbroken to even look at my phone." "Heartbroken?" Vivian sneered. "You knew she was still alive." Emily's mother crawled over from her daughter's side, grabbed my pant leg, and accused me, "You murderer!" The onlookers were discussing heatedly, and some had already called the police. "I think I heard that woman say she wasn't dead." "Yeah. It sounds like some kind of scam." I pretended to understand. "Wait, earlier by the lake, I did see Emily moving. Could she really still be alive?" I turned to Vivian, my eyes filled with determination. "Vivian, what are you doing? Why did you lie to me and say Emily was dead?" Vivian looked completely broken and started crying. "We just wanted Emily to leave you. She and Chris have been together for a long time. She wants to start over with him. So you forged the death certificate and staged this whole thing." My voice trembled with anger. It was all to let her run off with her lover. Emily's mother sat on the ground, crying bitterly. "We just wanted her to be happy, but this is how it turned out." Looking at Emily being pulled ashore, I felt a surprising sense of satisfaction. I never thought I'd become the one responsible for this. Vivian nodded in collapse. "Yes, Emily is still alive. We just gave her a drug that makes her look like she drowned." I was so shocked I widened my eyes and raised my voice, asking, "What did you say? Are you saying Emily was pushed into the lake while she was conscious? Was she drowned?" Those words were like a bomb, causing the onlookers to start whispering among themselves. "Oh my God, this is murder. Call the police." The rescue workers looked pale too. No wonder she was still struggling in the water. "We thought it was just a natural reaction of someone drowning." Emily's mother heard this and fainted on the spot. I turned around suddenly and slapped Vivian. "How could you do this? Can you joke about something like this? My wife drowned accidentally. Why are you lying?" Vivian was dazed from the slap, covering her face. "I didn't lie. I swear." I sneered. "Then explain why you gave Emily the medicine. Why did you forge a death certificate? This story is full of holes." Vivian suddenly couldn't speak, and the people around her began to doubt her words. The police arrived quickly and started asking questions. I sadly told the police that my wife had tragically drowned today. I wanted to take her to see the lake view she loved most before she passed away, but unfortunately, the stretcher slipped. "This woman is my wife's friend. She might have lost her mind due to grief and said such absurd things." The police looked at Vivian skeptically and asked, "Ma'am, do you have any evidence to support your claim?" Vivian shook her head frantically and said, I don't have any." The ambulance took Emily's body and her unconscious mother to the hospital. I followed the ambulance, and before leaving, I told Vivian, "You scared the aunt like that. You have to take care of her too?" Vivian stood there, soaked in water, with the marks from my blows still on her face, staring blankly as the ambulance drove away. I sat in the ambulance, looking at Emily's body, but my heart was surprisingly calm. I had more important things to do: find the man named Chris. After returning from the hospital, I immediately hired a lawyer to begin handling Emily's estate. Last time, I was consumed by grief, and by the time I came to my senses, Emily's assets had already been divided between her mother and Chris. This time, I had to act before they did. "Mr. Johnson, according to the law, as Emily's spouse, you are entitled to inherit all of her property," the lawyer said, but I noticed there were several significant online loans under her name. I nodded, indicating I understood and would handle those matters. After hanging up, I began searching through Emily's belongings. Based on what I knew about her, she would never give all her money to Chris. She must have hidden it somewhere. I found an encrypted folder on her laptop. The password was the reverse of our wedding anniversary. She always used that as her password. Inside the folder was a photo of a key to a self-storage unit in the suburbs. The next morning, I drove to the storage unit. Using the key, I opened the door to find several suitcases neatly arranged inside. Opening the first suitcase, I was greeted by a pile of cash. Counting it, there was roughly $3 million. This amount was more than enough to pay off all the online loans, with some left over. After returning home, I immediately contacted all the loan companies and paid off all the debts. After settling everything, I sat on the sofa, poured myself a glass of red wine, raised it toward Emily's photo on the wall and said, "Thank you, dear. Thank you for helping me solve the issues of buying a house and repaying the debts. In this lifetime, I will live better than you ever imagined." I drank glass after glass until I collapsed on the sofa. The next morning, a sudden knock on the door woke me from my hangover. My head was pounding and I stumbled to the door. Standing outside were Vivian and Emily's mother, along with a man I didn't recognize, holding a child of about 3 or 4 years old. I immediately recognized the man as Chris, the same person I had seen in my previous life just before I died. Behind him stood 2 police officers, looking very serious. All 3 looked exhausted, their eyes bloodshot, clearly having not slept well for days. Emily's mother pointed at me, her voice trembling. "It's him! He killed my daughter!" Chris clung tightly to the child, his eyes filled with hatred. "Johnson, you must take responsibility for Emily's death." I leaned against the doorframe, the corners of my mouth curling slightly. Emily's mother rushed into the house, pointing at me excitedly. "Police! It's him! He knew my daughter wasn't dead, yet he deliberately pushed her into the lake to kill her. This was premeditated murder." I had suspected something like this would happen, but I didn't expect them to come so quickly. I rubbed my temples, looking exhausted. "Auntie, what are you talking about?" I picked up the folder from the coffee table and handed the death certificate to the police officer. "Officer, this is the death certificate from the hospital. My wife tragically drowned. I had intended to take her to see the lake view she loved most before she passed away, but the stretcher slipped accidentally. This was a complete accident." The police officer examined the certificate carefully and found no issues. I sighed deeply. Emily and I had been married for 4 years, and our relationship had always been very good. Her sudden death has left me deeply grieved. I just wanted her to see the scenery she loved one last time, but I never expected such an accident to happen. Chris walked up holding the child, his voice choked with emotion. "Johnson, I know this is hard for you to accept, but in reality, Emily and I have always loved each other. This child is our son, already 3 years old. Emily just wanted to be with us, so she planned this fake death." I studied the child in Chris's arms, a cold smile curling the corners of my mouth. So that was Emily's secret. She had an affair after marriage and had a child. Before we got married, Emily had solemnly said she didn't want children, and we had agreed to live a child-free life together, enjoying our time as a couple. I pretended to be surprised, but inside I thought, "Who are you? Why are you saying this about my wife?" Emily's mother pointed at me, her voice trembling. "Don't pretend. You knew Emily wanted to be with Chris, so you deliberately caused her to have an accident." My eyes grew red and a few tears fell. "Auntie, you can say I didn't take good care of Emily, but please don't say our relationship was bad. If our relationship was really bad, why would she leave all her property to me?" I took a document from the drawer of the coffee table. "Officer, this is a notarized will. You can take a look." After reviewing the will, the officer nodded, confirming its legal validity. Chris felt anxious, thinking this couldn't be true. How could Emily have left all her property to you? She did mention it before, but he stopped suddenly, realizing he almost said too much. I raised an eyebrow. What did she say exactly? Did she say she wanted to elope with you and have me take on the debt? "Emily never liked children," I said calmly. "We decided not to have children. That was her idea. So I don't really believe this child is hers. If you think this is Emily's child, please provide proof of a paternity test." Chris and Emily's mother exchanged glances. "We haven't conducted a paternity test yet, but this child is indeed Emily's." I turned to the police officer and asked, "Officer, did you see that? My wife just passed away, and now they've brought an unknown child here accusing me of murdering my wife. Their statements contradict each other, and there's no evidence." Emily's mother hurriedly said, "I can do a paternity test with the child to prove I'm his grandmother. That would prove he's Emily's child, wouldn't it?" However, the police shook their heads, deeming the proof insufficient. "Even if you have a blood relationship with the child, it doesn't directly prove the child is the deceased's child. Moreover, your mother-daughter relationship with Emily doesn't completely rule out the possibility that Emily had other children." I chuckled to myself. One of the reasons I insisted on confirming Emily's death was because I was worried she might have had an illegitimate child outside. I never thought I'd be right. Emily's mother and Chris exchanged glances. Chris clenched his teeth. Though he didn't know who the child belonged to, Emily was indeed dead. He was the one who pushed her into the lake and caused all this. He's a suspect and has no right to inherit Emily's estate. I smiled softly. Chris was right, but only if he had evidence to prove I was the murderer. The police officer looked at Chris and asked, Mr. Chris, do you have any evidence to prove that Mr. Johnson killed his wife? Chris was at a loss for words, unable to think of any concrete evidence. I immediately turned to Vivian and asked, Vivian, as a medical professional, can you tell the officer whether Emily is alive or dead? You have your professional ethics and your family. Think carefully before you answer. Moreover, I must emphasize that you were both present yesterday when the stretcher slid into the lake. If Emily is still alive, you two might be the ones truly responsible for all this. I deliberately framed it as their fault, leaving Emily's mother speechless. Vivian's face turned pale, and she avoided Emily's mother and Chris's gaze. She was indeed gone. Medically speaking, Chris suddenly picked up his phone, gave a cold laugh, and said, I knew you'd say that, so I prepared evidence. Then he played a video showing 4 people discussing a plan for a fake death. Emily's voice was clear, saying, Vivian, help me get the drug that makes someone look like they're dead, then get me a death certificate. Once Johnson thinks I'm dead, I can leave with Chris and start over. Vivian knelt down, covering her face. She was completely broken. I was just trying to help a friend. I pretended to be shocked, then suddenly raised my voice and said, Officer, I need to report a crime. These 3 people conspired to deceive me, making me believe my wife was dead. Vivian and Emily's mother knew I wanted to take Emily to see the Lakeview, yet they deliberately didn't tell me she was still alive. This is outright intentional disappointment. I stared at Emily's mother and Chris, following the standard procedure for dealing with an unexpected drowning incident. What was wrong with that? They clearly didn't expect me to respond so calmly. My voice trembled slightly, and tears welled up in my eyes. Emily's mother, when I heard the news about Emily's death, why didn't you tell me the truth? If she just wanted a divorce, how could I possibly refuse? You two were clearly colluding to deceive Emily and push her down this path of fake death. Emily's mother stammered an explanation, saying that because Emily insisted you believe she was really dead, they dared not tell the truth. I pulled out my phone and showed her the call history. How do you explain this? When I took Emily to the lake, you called me dozens of times. I didn't answer because I was too sad. Why didn't you send a text message to tell me the truth? When we arrived at the lake, Emily hadn't even entered the water yet. Why did you continue to hide the truth? Vivian and Emily's mother looked at each other, unable to say a word. I knew in my heart that they thought there was still plenty of time. As long as they delayed a bit at the lake, they could carry out their plans smoothly. After all, greed always leads people to take risks. The police listened to both sides' accounts, and their expressions grew serious. This matter was too complicated. All of you come with me to the police station. We need to continue the investigation. Then he looked at Vivian, especially you. As a medical professional, you forged the death certificate. This is a serious matter. Vivian's face turned pale, and she collapsed onto the ground. Emily's mother and Chris were also taken away by the police, and the child Chris was holding was temporarily placed under the care of social services. I followed the police out the door, a faint smile curving my lips. This farce would finally end with my victory. After 2 weeks of investigation, the police confirmed that I was the victim in this tragedy. The investigators contacted our neighbors, colleagues, and friends, reviewed the surveillance footage from our home, and found that Emily and I were seen as a model couple by others. I never interfered in her social life, respected her personal space, and didn't even know her phone password. In such a marriage, how could I possibly harm my wife for no reason? In contrast, Vivian, Emily's mother, and Chris's statements were inconsistent. They had plenty of opportunities to tell me Emily was still alive, yet they chose to appear only after she had drowned. Especially Vivian and Emily's mother, who saw Emily slip into the lake but chose not to help, even preventing bystanders from rescuing her. They claimed it was an accident, but who would easily believe such a coincidence? What's more puzzling is that the entire fake death plan itself was dangerous and unreliable. As the investigation deepened, my image as a person who had lost a partner became clearer, while the other 3 were formally arrested on suspicion of murder. 8 months later, the court ruled that the 3 were guilty of murder. Vivian was sentenced to 15 years for forging medical documents and aiding in murder, while Emily's mother and Chris were both sentenced to life imprisonment. Shortly after the verdict, Emily's mother suffered a cerebral hemorrhage in prison and died despite efforts to save her. Vivian's husband, upon learning the truth, immediately filed for divorce and moved to another province with their daughter. Prison guards reported that Vivian cried constantly and attempted suicide multiple times, eventually being transferred to a psychiatric ward. Chris has been writing me letters, pleading for me to visit him or, for Emily's sake, to adopt him and Emily's child. I replied with a brief letter, informing him that the child had been placed in a welfare institution. I am not a saint. I cannot raise a child connected to the man who killed my wife. Later, I sold the house filled with memories and used Emily's inheritance and insurance money to purchase a seaside villa. Emily's ashes are still in a cabinet in my study. Though I know it's just lake water and sand, it's a necessary item to maintain the image of a grieving husband. Every night, when it's quiet, I stand alone on the balcony, looking out at the distant sea and feel a sense of peace.